Thanks for that introduction, Dharmajit. So yeah, I'm gonna give a talk called the Raincloud and the Pool of Lotuses, and yeah, I'm gonna start by just talking about the last talk I gave here, which was around Padmasambhava Day, and I talked about Padmasambhava and his journey to Tibet. So I'm going to kind of recount that story in brief, because it kind of relates to this evening. So so yes, we all know who Padmasambhava is, and we all, if we know anything of Padmasambhava, we tend to know about the fact that he was invited to Tibet to bring the Dharma to Tibet and to help it flourish. And there's this story of the monastery of Samye being built, and in a day and overnight it would be torn down by the local demons, and they can't sort out this problem. But Santarachita, who is the abbot who's brought to Tibet to teach the Dharma and to train people in the Dharma, even he can't sort it out. So, but he knows of Padmasambhava, he knows of Guru Rinpoche, and he sends for him. And they send some people out to try and find him. And they find him and they invite Padmasambhava to Tibet and to extinguish and see away with these demons there that are causing havoc. And Padmasambhava accepts that invitation and makes his way. He sends on the servants. He says, "I'll meet you there," and he heads in the direction of Tibet. But one of the things I emphasized in that talk was, we tend to just think, when we think of Padmasambhava and the journey to Tibet, is that he's invited, he accepts the invitation, he arrives, sorts the place out. But actually, if you look at the life and liberation where that story is recounted, actually it unfolds in a very slow way. I don't know how long it takes, but in my imagination it takes months, even I like to think years, for Padmasambhava to arrive, because the servants keep getting sent back to find where Padmasambhava is, and they keep saying, like, "Are you coming? You said you'd come." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm on my way, you go ahead." And the whole way to Tibet, he meets demons along the path, and he has the sense and the wisdom to confront and deal with those demons as and when he finds them. So one of the things he does is that he gets to know them. He finds out their name and he finds out who they are and gets to know them, and then he gives them something to do. Gives them something to hold, like a jewel or a teaching. So he actually uses their wrathfulness, their protectfulness, to service the Dharma. But as he moves on from those demons, in my imagination at least, they still look like demons. He hasn't extinguished them, he hasn't killed them off, he's actually converted them to the Dharma, but they still are demons. They're just demons put to use. And he does this every single demon he meets along the way. And finally he arrives in Tibet, finally he arrives at the monastery, and then he converts those demons there as well. And I emphasized this point last time in relation to patience, and as fathers on the path, assuming we're still young fathers or old fathers or whatever, you do need patience. And there's something I find so moving about Padmasambhava thoughtfully making his way there and having the sense to deal with all demons that could make their way to the monastery. So it's Padmasambhava in a very practical mode, which we tend not to think of Padmasambhava in that way. I don't tend to think of Padmasambhava like that, as being practical. You don't ever look at an image of Padmasambhava and think, that's a very practical person. So I mentioned that because one of the things I wanted to do last time, which I didn't have time for, is relate those demons to us. And So there are some demons that I have met along the way that relate to being a father. So what I mean by that is having little time, having little energy, which in a way transcends being a father anyway. So this could be a talk that you could relate to anyone who's a Buddhist, because as a Buddhist, we will tend not to be able to give enough time and energy to the Dharma life. But it does relate to us. The demons I'm going to talk about really do relate to us as fathers, and they are the demons that we will meet on our journey, are the demons of comparison, the demons of envy, and the demons of jealousy. And particularly if you're a young father, you're going to see a lot of people around you who are in better conditions than you. And sometimes that is subjective, but often I think it is objective. I think one of the great things I did was to actually acknowledge that some of my fellow Dharma brothers were in principle, in better conditions than me. You know, they were relatively free and single, could go to Padmaloko on retreat as and when they wanted. So often they lived in community. Often they were able to see the friends I loved most more than I could see them, all because of the choices that they'd made in their life at that point anyway, not to have children and not to be married or in a long-term relationship. So these are really part of my early Dharma life back in 2009 up to, you know, maybe a couple of years before I was ordained, were these demons of comparison, envy and jealousy in relationship to my other Dharma brothers having more freedom than I did, more time on retreat. Therefore, that meant they were wiser than me, more practiced than me, and worse still, more committed than me. And so I'm going to speak about these demons and how we can kind of go beyond them, really. So this whole thing about comparison with others, and again, it does transcend being a father, because we all do this. Like, we all, whether we're fathers or not, will look at other people around us and compare ourselves to them. You know, I do that definitely with the jits. You know, I compare myself to them and I think, oh, you know, Aryajit's got this quality, Sanghajit's got this quality, and there's something really natural about that and sort of okay about that, but it can be problematic. So it reminded me, thinking about these three demons of comparison, envy, and jealousy, about, and I couldn't locate the source for this. So, but I remember when I was going through this, that Parama Bandhu, who led my Mitra study, told me that the Buddha had taught about the three arrogances or three conceits or three prides. And I don't know where they are, where they're written down. I'm assuming Parama Bandhu wasn't just making it up, but they are out there somewhere. But I remember him saying that when we think about pride and arrogance and conceit, we tend to think of people who think they're better than other people, right? So that's typically what we think about. But the Buddha says somewhere in all of this, all of these teachings, somewhere he says that it's the no worse or better pride or arrogance than thinking that you are the same as other people, that you're as good as other people. And I kind of got that. But then Parama Bandhu said, and that's no worse an arrogance or pride than thinking you're worse than people, which is where I was, and it probably is my default place to be, really, in relation to other people, is to think I'm worse than them, you know. And that was kind of really woke me up to think that is arrogant, to think that is a kind of conceit, to think that you are worse than somebody, because it does involve a story, doesn't it? All three of those, whether you think you're better than others, the same as others, or worse than others, all involve some investment of a story to keep going. And I think the story of I'm worse than others, it takes a lot of energy and effort to keep that story and convince yourself of that. And I definitely did that when I was approaching fatherhood. I really felt that becoming a father, I literally believed that it would be the end of me as a Buddhist, and that it would mean that I was the worst of the worst. Such were my expectations of how to commit to the Dharma. So that's just worth bearing in mind, that when we think we're worse than others, that may or may not be true, but we are holding a position in relation to others. We are identifying a bit too much with ourselves in relation to others. So I wanted to talk about the image of the lotus pond and the rain cloud as a way of kind of sort of getting out of that way of thinking in terms of comparison, because it's easy for somebody to say, oh, don't compare yourself to others. We say that all the time, don't we? But we will compare ourselves to others because it's so compelling to do that. You know, we really, when others are on retreat and we can't get on retreat, we will think I don't know, we will lead us to think we're less committed or that we're done for. We actually have to invest some energy in that story, in the same way that, you know, when we're feeling pretty pumped up and, you know, we're feeling really good about ourselves, or we've just been on retreat, we'll start to maybe feel equal to others. We'll think, actually, no, I'm all right. You know, I've been on a 10-day retreat and I'm all right. I'm the same as everyone else. Or we might think that we're better than others, but it's the same thing. The Buddha's saying it's the same thing. So how do we get past this? Is to, well, for me, has been to just think about the Dharma life in terms of growth, and that essentially what the Dharma life is about is everyone growing. That is the only thing we're required to do in the Dharma life, is to be growing consistently. It's not required of us to be better than other people or worse than other people or the same as other people. So I read this this piece out from Bante, which is the start of a paper that he writes, and this really beautiful description, really accurate description of a lotus pond. And I don't know how you felt about that when you heard that, but I really resonate with this image. You know, the whole darkness and the gloominess of it all really speaks to me in terms of how I tend to think of myself as being worse than others, even though the image ends with lotus flowers breaking free and lotus flowers that are just beneath the surface or breaking into the air. Or predominantly this piece really speaks about the darkness and the mud and the slime and all of that stuff. So as beautiful as this image is and that piece is, I think we can over-identify with being a lotus seed in the slime and in the mud. You know, as much as potential there is in a lotus seed that is in the mud and slime, we can over-identify with being stuck in the mud and being in the dark and in the cold. And we can over-identify with there being other lotuses that we can see that are climbing up towards the surface and are breaking free. Because that is true. There are other lotuses that are progressing faster or seem to be progressing faster, but it's definitely true that there are lotuses and brothers that will be further along the path than we are. But the tendency, I think, for me, and maybe perhaps for you, is to over-identify with being in the slime and the mud, and forget that we are in a lotus pool. That we are actually in a pool that is full of lotuses. And that image of the lotus pool, for those of us that have, seen them or even seen water lilies, it's just absolutely gorgeous, isn't it? It's absolutely amazing when you see even just a plant pot with one water lily in it. It's just absolutely stunning. So I think that's the first thing, is that we need to identify with being in the slime and the mud. So as fathers, or as anyone, we need to really own up to the fact that we are in a certain set of conditions, which can sometimes be less than ideal. So it's important we acknowledge that, but it's also important that we acknowledge that we are in a lotus pond, that we're in this bigger space that is truly magnificent, where water lilies and lotuses, which are the most stunning of all flowers, can grow. So there's this image that Bhante presents, and then there's the parable of the rain cloud. So I'm going to read a little bit from the parable. I won't read it all. It's tempting to read it all, but I won't read it all. But I'll just give you a sense of what the parable of rain cloud is, for those of us that don't know it. So this is a translation from Bante's book, The Drama of Cosmic Enlightenment, which is his commentary on the White Lotus Sutra and the main kind of myths and symbols in that sutra. So this is the translation. This isn't Bhante. It is like unto a great cloud rising above the world, covering all things everywhere. A gracious cloud full of moisture, lightning flames flash and dazzle. Voice of thunder vibrates afar, bringing joy and ease to all. The sun's rays are veiled and the earth is cooled. The cloud lowers and spreads as if it might be caught and gathered. Its rain everywhere equally descends on all sides, streaming and pouring unstinted, permeating the land, on mountains, by rivers, in valleys, in hidden recesses. There grow the plants, trees and herbs, trees both great and small, the shoots of ripening grain, grapevine and sugarcane. Fertilized are these by the rain, and abundantly enriched. The dry ground is soaked. Herbs and trees flourish together. From the one water which issued from that cloud, plants, trees, thickets, forests, according to need, receive moisture. All the various trees, lofty, medium, low, each according to its size, grows and develops. Roots, stalks, branches, leaves, blossoms and fruits in their brilliant colors. Wherever the one rain reaches, all become fresh and glossy, according as their bodies, forms and natures are great or small. So the enriching rain, though it is one and the same, make each of them flourish. So I'll stop there. It goes on in that way, but it gives you a sense of the kind of parable of the rain cloud. And this is kind of like the other end, if you like. If the image of the lotus pond is Bante's piece there of the awakening of the heart, is the path of self-development, where we have to acknowledge where we are. We're in the slime and in the mud, and we want to break free into the sunlight and receive the kiss of benediction from our Lord, as Bhante puts it. Then we'll need to develop ourselves. We'll actually need to do some stuff. We'll need to meditate and go on retreat and all of that stuff. So it is up to us when we're stuck in that mud and slime. No one is going to get us out into that sunlit air other than ourselves. It is up to us. And we first acknowledge where we are and the conditions we're in. And that's about that. We then have to start to practice wherever we are. And then there's this image of the rain cloud. So obviously the rain cloud is the Buddha, and the rain is the Dharma, and the plants are us. But what's really important about this and moving for me, and why I return to this image, is that there's one rain that falls, and it falls on all plants equally. It doesn't fall on others more than others. So that's what's really important. The second thing that's really important is that everything grows according to its nature. So as Bante says in a lecture he gave around this, palm trees grow into palm trees, and sunflowers grow into sunflowers. Sunflowers don't grow into palm trees. Palm trees don't grow into sunflowers. So I think that's really worth keeping in mind, that when we have acknowledged the conditions we're in, we then receive the rain, and we then allow ourselves to grow as we can only grow, which is to grow into more of ourselves, to grow into a bigger, better version of ourselves. We won't be able to grow into, I won't be able to grow into Sangajit as much as I would love to, and I won't be able to grow into Arijit. And it's obscene to think I could grow into being Maitreya Bandhu. So I can only grow into being more and more Dharmajit, more and more myself. That's all. And if I'm not happy with that, then it's going to be really painful for the rest of my life to be not satisfied with becoming more and more of myself. And this is what this image offers us. When we use it with the lotus pond and the seed stuck in the mud and slime, when we hold that in the one hand and we really feel the coldness and the darkness of our situation, just as Buddhists generally, because it is not easy to practice the Dharma. And then we hold up this other image of the rain cloud, the Buddha above us raining down the Dharma, which refreshes our lotus pool. If we hold both of those, then we've got pretty much everything we need. We have self-development on one hand. So we're going to have to get out of this pond. We're going to have to bloom ourselves. But you can only do that for so long. If you do that exclusively, in my experience of just concentrating on self-development, you will become mad. Like, you'll actually drive yourself insane. You actually have to come with some self-surrender, which is surrendering yourself to the rain, just letting the rain come down on you. And that's where these two images leave me, moving between the two, holding the two as equally as I can do. Yeah. So we need to kind of, how I use these images is to imagine them. So imagine myself growing, imagining myself breaking free, imagining myself climbing up through the cold and dark into the light, imagining myself receiving the rain, the refreshing rain of the Dharma from the Buddha. And in a way, that is how I think I make progress, to use that word, is by kind of imagining myself making progress, to kind of like feel my way into the kind of images of being closer to the Buddha. In a way, that's what we do in the order when we have our sadhanas, is we're kind of imagining ourselves being right up close to the Buddha or to the Bodhisattva. We aren't that close. We will feel so far away. I feel so far away from Padmasambhava. but I try in my sadhana to imagine being closer and closer to him. And when I imagine that, I feel closer to him in my life more generally. So I just thought I'd end by kind of coming back to the image of the rain cloud raining on all equally, and to say that there is just growth. There is just growth. And there is the path, and there is progress, but essentially you are going to grow in the way that you're going to grow. So I just thought I'd end by sort of telling you a bit more about why I find the parable of the rain cloud so important. That when I was with the Jits at Bante's funeral, and other people will have noticed this, is if you look at images of Bante's coffin, you'll notice that depicted on the coffin is the parable of the rain cloud. And I find this so important to reflect on, that Bante's last teaching to us was just grow. I don't care how you grow, but just grow. And that's really kind of stuck with me over the last couple of years, that the parable of the rain cloud must have been, important to Bante. Obviously, the images of lotuses and water in the awakening of the heart, which I read earlier, must have been important to him. But that's actually on his coffin. This parable is actually depicted. And the central message of that parable is that rain falls equally on all, and all grow according to one's nature. And that feels like such a positive last teaching from Bante for me personally, which is, I can take from that Bante was primarily interested in people growing and nothing else. So anyway, that's a good place to end, I think. But do look it up. Do look at pictures of the funeral. It's beautiful when you look at that. That's actually what's depicted. Yes. So I think I'll leave it there. So hopefully you can go away and draw on these two opposite ends of acknowledging where we are, acknowledging this seed in this cold, wet, dark bed of slime and mud. And I'm not being down on us as fathers, by the way. I think that applies to all of us when we acknowledge, if you're free, single, and you've got loads of time on your hand, you are still going to feel like a seed in the dark slime and mud. But you've got that on the one hand, and on the other hand, you've got the Buddha above your head, the Buddha above you, raining down the Dharma, refreshing your lotus pond. So yeah, I'll leave it there.